welcome to Strawberry Ink, where we examine the darkest and most tragic cases to uncover the truth. Today, we focus on the heartbreaking story of Baby Evelyn, a young life lost too soon. This case will haunt your thoughts, filled with lies, manipulation, and betrayal. A case that leaves us asking, how could something so horrific happen to an innocent child? In November 2020, Evelyn Boswell, a 15-month-old girl from Tennessee, was reported missing by her family. The initial disappearance seemed like a tragic yet typical case of a missing child. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered something far more sinister. Evelyn had been dead for months before anyone noticed she was gone. Evelyn's mother, Megan Boswell, was the last person known to have seen her daughter alive. However, it wasn't until February 2020, 3 months later, that authorities learned the truth about Evelyn's fate. Megan reported Evelyn missing, but as the investigation progressed, it became clear that Megan's story didn't add up. Megan claimed that Evelyn had been in the care of a family member, but that version of events quickly unraveled. The timeline didn't make sense. Investigators soon found out that Megan had lied repeatedly about where Evelyn was and what happened to her. Megan was arrested at her house on charges of false reporting. But that was only the beginning. Her mom was present during her arrest and confused on why the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office wanted to speak to her daughter. They took Megan to their headquarters and released her for the time being without her having to pay bail. However, she was ordered to appear in court on a charge of filing a false report, a Class C misdemeanor. Megan appeared before Judge Klein Lauterbach. The following month, on March 6, 2020, the tragic discovery of Evelyn's remains in a wooded area near Sullivan County shocked the world. Authorities found her body hidden in a garbage bag. The body was taken to the Sullivan County Coroner's Office and confirmed as Evelyn. Shortly after, her death was ruled a murder. The TBI then arrested Megan at her grandmother's house. This was her second arrest. After Megan was taken to the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office's headquarters to be processed, she was booked into the county's jail on a $25,000 bail. However, some restrictions prevented her from being released. Megan was tied to a criminal probe within the state of Tennessee. There was then a memorial service held for Evelyn at the Model City Event Center in Kingsport on March 13, 2020. Only a celebration of life was held. Since Evelyn's body was incomplete, there could be no funeral visitation. Those remains were buried at the Glenwood Cemetery in Bristol. For 3 months, no one knew that Evelyn was dead, and her mother, Megan, had not reported her death. Tennessee prosecutor Amber Mazingill had presented the case to a grand jury in the Sullivan County Circuit Court. Once the indictment was unsealed and the charges were filed, Megan was officially charged with the murder of her daughter Evelyn. The investigation revealed that Evelyn had been murdered, and the cause of death was determined to be homicide. Though the precise method was never disclosed, it was later discovered that Megan Boswell had been involved in covering up her daughter's death, providing conflicting stories to law enforcement. The more authorities learned about Megan, the more troubling details came to light. Megan Boswell, who was only 18 years old at the time, had a history of dishonesty and manipulative behavior. She had made multiple false reports to the police, and her lack of remorse raised suspicions from the start. Throughout her time in custody, She maintained her innocence, but investigators were certain that the evidence pointed to her. Judge Jim Goodwin would go on to preside over her trial. She pleaded not guilty to the charges, and her new bond was set to $10,000. Once more of Evelyn's remains were found at the family member's home. Megan's bond was increased to $130,000. Those remains were then put with the rest of her body at the cemetery. She awaited trial in custody at the Sullivan County Jail as she faced a no-bond charge, first-degree murder. Her initial misdemeanor was dismissed by Judge Lauterbach, as there was no need to prosecute it anymore. No prosecutor was ever assigned to that case, and no defense attorney ever joined into it either. In February 2025, Megan's murder trial was set to begin, and the public's attention was focused on what led to the tragic end of Baby Evelyn. Throughout the media, it was called the Baby Evelyn murder trial. The prosecution argued that Megan intentionally killed her daughter, her own flesh and blood, and then covered it up with lies. But Megan's defense team countered, attempting to claim that there was insufficient evidence to convict her of murder. They said the evidence was circumstantial and that Megan was overwhelmed by her situation. However, the prosecution's case was strong. Investigators had gathered evidence of deception, including Megan's change in stories, her failure to report Evelyn's death immediately, and her lack of concern for her daughter's well-being. The trial for Megan Boswell became a battle not only for the justice of Baby Evelyn, but also to understand what could drive a mother to commit such a terrible attack. Was it mental health issues? Was it a history of neglect or abuse? Or was it more sinister? A premeditated act of violence against her defenseless child? As the trial unfolded, the evidence against Megan mounted. The devastating facts of the case began to fill the gaps, painting a picture of a mother who had failed her child in the most unimaginable way. Megan's defense also pointed out that she had suffered from difficult circumstances, including her own troubled childhood and family dynamics. Some believed that this contributed to her behavior, but for others, it was no excuse for the brutal murder of a child. Evelyn's short life was marred by betrayal and loss. What could have been a bright future for her was tragically stolen by the very person who was supposed to protect her. On February 13, 2025, the jury in Megan's trial convicted her on all charges, being 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of endangerment, 1 count of evidence tampering, 12 counts of filing a false report, 1 count of corpse abuse, and 1 count of failure to comply, all felonies. Afterwards, there was a quick sentencing phase of the trial, which ended in this jury recommending life with the possibility of parole for Megan, for the 3 murder charges. Judge Goodwin on the same day imposed a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after completing 51 years. She gets a 5-year jail credit for time served while awaiting trial in custody since her second arrest. Megan waived a pre-sentence investigation for the rest of her charges. She will be sentenced for those remaining ones on May 22, 2025. Follow my TikTok page, Strawberry Inc., to stay up to date, because I may or may not cover this case here again. We will see how it ends for Megan. Meanwhile, she is being evaluated at the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Nashville. Thank you for listening. The case of Baby Evelyn Boswell is one of profound sorrow and tragedy. We will continue to follow this case as justice is pursued. Stay tuned for more updates. Megan will spend the rest of her youth behind bars. She will be an old lady if she is ever released. Stay safe out there. Have a good rest of your day. Please share this episode to your loved ones. Goodbye.